This is a big story we have been talking about here in the newsroom. In California, a team of investigators say they have identified the Zodiac Killer, whom they believe is connected to 5 murders.
For over 50 years now, the Zodiac Killer has lived in that strange space between history and legend. Half true crime, half urban myth. Back in 1968 and 1969, San Francisco and the surrounding Bay Area were gripped with fear. A series of brutal murders shocked the community. But what made the case infamous wasn't just the killings. It was the way this faceless figure toyed with everyone.
Brutally murdering 5 innocent victims. He sent cryptic messages to police and local newspapers, taunting the public with cryptograms and clues to his identity.
He sent letters stuffed with taunts, threats, and these bizarre ciphers that left police and codebreakers stumped for decades. Newspapers published his words. The public was terrified. And the man behind it all, never caught.
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder.
If
you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, public park, you'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
Now fast forward to today. After decades of dead ends and unanswered questions, detectives have gone back to those original Zodiac files armed with modern technology. By digitally enhancing the evidence, they've uncovered a hidden detail that no one noticed before. It's not the final answer to who the Zodiac was, but it's enough to shake up what we thought we knew about one of America's most terrifying unsolved cases.
Is the Zodiac Killer.
Search goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer.
A young man's voice reported the double murder. There have been 3 slayings in the Vallejo area in the past year.
The psychotic killer has already murdered 5. 1 at a lover's lane near a lake just north of San Francisco. 3 others in nearby Vallejo. The latest, a taxi driver in San Francisco.
But it seems that a solution to the 5 Zodiac murders is just as far away as it was before.
Segment 1. The Revelation. What was just confirmed. All right, so what really came out of these enhanced files? No hype, no urban legends, just what's been confirmed. Detectives took the original Zodiac letters, the ones he mailed to newspapers and police stations, and scanned them with ultra-sensitive imaging. And what showed up? Indentations. Basically, the dents in the paper left behind from his pen. Now, here's why that's insane. Those marks revealed that the Zodiac wasn't writing one letter and sending it off. He was writing multiples. Drafts, rehearsals, all done intelligently.
Graphing, his phrasing, his punctuation is very good. I'm sure he has deliberately misspelled words in an attempt to lead us to believe that he's illiterate, but in so doing, why, he's led us to the point that we believe just the opposite.
Think about that. For years, we pictured him as this impulsive maniac, scribbling taunts and dropping them in the mailbox. Nope. The enhanced files prove he was more calculated. He was practicing. He wanted his words, his threats, even his handwriting, to land a certain way. And the creepiest part? Some of those indentations weren't just practice lines. Investigators found traces of random words and numbers that didn't make it into the final letters. One of them looks like part of a street name in Vallejo, where 2 of his earliest confirmed attacks happened. Now, I'm not saying this means, oh hey, he lived right there. But it does mean that for the first time, Zodiac might have accidentally left behind a geographic clue in his own process. That's the kind of detail detectives in the 70s could never have seen, because the tech just wasn't there yet. And here's another overlooked detail. When they analyzed the pen pressure, they noticed the Zodiac pressed harder on certain words. Words like kill and fear. It's subtle, but it shows he wasn't just writing, he was performing. He wanted those words to stand out, not just in meaning, but in the way they looked on the page. That's chilling. Let me ask you this. Imagine getting one of those letters in your mailbox back in 1969. You open it, and not only are the words threatening, but you can literally see and feel the aggression in how hard the pen dug into the paper. That's next-level psychological warfare. And it doesn't stop there. The enhanced scans of the envelopes showed something else. Faint outlines where he practiced drawing his crosshair symbol. Yeah, that logo he signed everything with? He wasn't free-handing it. He was making sure it looked perfect, consistent, almost like a brand. And that's exactly what it became. A brand of fear. And honestly, it became more terrifying. But if the letters held that many hidden layers, imagine what happens when investigators go back to the crime scenes themselves. The weapons, the disguises, even the patterns of where he struck. All of that's been re-examined too. And trust me, the details are even darker than the letters. Let's get into it. Segment 2. The original case and its mysteries. So now that we've cracked open the letters, let's rewind a little and visit the crime scenes. Because the Zodiac wasn't just about creepy envelopes and ciphers. He was out there on the ground, committing murders that to this day still leave detectives shaking their heads in absolute disbelief.
We had a double homicide that took place out on a county road about sometime after 11 o'clock last night. A double homicide involving victims were a 16-year-old girl and a 17-year-old.
Here's what we know for sure. Between 1968 and 1969, the Zodiac Killer officially claimed 5 lives in Northern California. Those are the ones law enforcement ties directly to him. But in his letters, he bragged about killing 37 people. 37! Now, was he inflating his numbers for shock value? That could be the case. But we're sticking to the confirmed cases right now. And even those 5 are enough to send chills down your spine.
The psychotic killer has already murdered 5. 1 at a lover's lane near a lake just north of San Francisco. 3 others in nearby Vallejo. The latest, a taxi driver in San Francisco.
The first recognized Zodiac attack was December 20th, 1968. Teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were on their first date, parked in a lover's lane spot near Vallejo. Think about that for a second. 2 kids, just excited to be together, sitting in a car like countless other couples across America at that time. A gunman walks up and changes everything. Betty Lou was shot 5 times in the back as she tried to run. David was killed with a bullet to the head. No robbery, no assault. Just walked up to them and bang.
The car by the responsible, and the boy was shot right at the side of the car, and the girl apparently tried to run, and she was shot and found 28 feet further on.
6 months later, July 4th, 1969, same area. Another couple, Darlene Farron and Mike McJoe. They were sitting in a parked car when a man walked up with a flashlight in one hand and a 9mm handgun in the other. He opened fire. Darlene didn't survive. Mike somehow lived, and he gave police their first shaky description of the killer. A heavy-set white male, around 5 feet 8 inches, maybe 5 feet 9 inches. Now, here's where things start getting weird. Just 40 minutes later, a man called the Vallejo Police Department. He claimed responsibility for both shootings, giving exact details only the killer would know. And at the end of the call, he signed off with this chilling line: "I also killed those kids last year." That's when police realized this wasn't random. They were dealing with a serial predator. But it gets even more disturbing. On September 27th, 1969, at Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac pulled off his most theatrical attack yet. A young couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were picnicking by the water when a man walked up wearing, and I'm not kidding here, a black hood like an executioner's mask, with his crosshair symbol drawn on the chest. He somehow overpowered the couple, tied them up, pulled out a knife, and stabbed them repeatedly. Cecilia later died from her injuries. Brian survived, and his testimony is what gave us one of the only known sightings of this serial predator.
I did think I was going to die, and so from that moment on, one has to have certain goals that you have to set. The first goal, of course, was to live. I suppose the second goal was to get untied. The next one was to get help. From getting help, getting to the hospital. At this robbery stage, I didn't consider any real threat to my life or to the girl or anything. I really didn't consider this, but I really wanted to help him. And
did he seem as though he would like your help at all?
No, he didn't, and he didn't even end up taking the money.
And this is the detail most people forget. Before leaving, the killer walked to Brian's car and wrote on the door with a black marker the dates of his previous crimes and the phrase, "by knife."
The circle with the vertical and horizontal line running through it was displayed on the door, and there were several dates, and then it ended with September 27th, 1969, 6:30 p.m. by knife, which was our crime. And so he had left his calling card is what he had done.
It was like he was signing his work. Who does that? Only a psychopath, right? Then came October 11th, 1969. San Francisco cab driver Paul Stein was shot in the head at point-blank range. But here's the twist. This was in a residential neighborhood, not some secluded spot. Witnesses saw a man wiping down the cab, even tearing off a piece of Stein's shirt as a trophy. That piece of shirt later showed up in a Zodiac letter, proving he was behind it. So why does this matter for the enhanced files? Because when detectives went back to the original crime scene reports, they noticed tiny inconsistencies. For example, in the Lake Berryessa attack, Brian described how the killer spoke calmly, almost rehearsed, while he tied them up. Combine that with the new evidence of him drafting letters in multiples, and it paints the Zodiac as more than just a violent impulse killer. He was methodical. He prepared his words and his actions. Another overlooked detail. After the Paul Stein murder, police officers actually stopped a man who matched the suspect description walking just a few blocks away. They let him go because the dispatcher mistakenly said they were looking for a black suspect instead of a white one. That mistake, that one line over the radio, may have been the closest police ever got to catching the Zodiac in the act. And that's the thing. When you line up the official murders, the teens at lovers' lanes, the theatrical stabbing, the cab driver, you see a killer who wasn't sticking to one pattern. He was unpredictable, and that's part of why he was so terrifying. Gun, knife, public, private, couples, lone victim. He switched it up constantly. No consistency pattern like most serial predators. But the enhanced files bring a new angle to these old cases. Detectives have started comparing the physical evidence, ballistics, handwriting pressure, even those faint paper impressions against the crime scene notes. And one detail is striking. Zodiac may have been exaggerating his kill count, sure, but the variety in his methods was still deliberate. He wanted chaos, he wanted fear, and every crime, every letter fed that image. So, to put it simply, even if you only look at the confirmed cases, the Zodiac was terrifying enough. But the enhanced files are making people ask, did we underestimate just how far this spread? And if the murders themselves raise that many questions, the letters are a whole other world. Because while the crimes made the Bay Area afraid, it was the letters that made the Zodiac famous. And when investigators enhanced those pages, they found details nobody had noticed in 50 years. This is where things get even crazier. Segment 3. The letters and ciphers. So, let's talk about the real reason the Zodiac became the Zodiac. It wasn't just the murders, it was the letters. The guy wasn't satisfied with killing. He wanted an audience. And oh, he made sure to get one. Starting in 1969, he flooded newspapers with these handwritten letters, full of taunts, confessions, and most famously, ciphers. He literally dared the public and the police to solve his puzzles. One of his first notes, the 408 cipher, gets cracked within a week by a schoolteacher and his wife. Think about that. The police, the FBI, everyone's stumped. But a couple sits down at their kitchen table and goes, "Oh yeah, we've got this." And boom, decoded. And what did the message say? Did it reveal his name? His address? Nope. It was just him bragging about how killing people made him feel like he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. Dark, creepy, and kind of anticlimactic. But it worked. Everyone was talking about him. The most famous was the 340-character cipher. From 1969 until 2020, yes, over 50 years, it sat unsolved, haunting detectives, the FBI, and thousands of amateur codebreakers who tried to crack it. When it was finally solved in 2020, the message wasn't his name or anything that would close the case. Nope. It was him mocking the police, saying he wasn't afraid of being caught, wasn't afraid of the gas chamber, and that his crimes gave him paradise. Basically, another taunt. No identity, no closure, just pure ego. But here's where the enhanced files change the game. Detectives went back to those original letters with modern forensic imaging. And guess what? They found faint fingerprints, pressure points, even hidden impressions in the handwriting that nobody noticed before. Almost like ghost marks left behind when he pressed too hard or scribbled on another sheet. It's the kind of detail that doesn't show up to the naked eye. But now it does. And that flips the angle a bit. Because maybe the real secrets aren't in the words at all, but in the way those words were written. Every smudge, every indentation, every faint line could be the Zodiac slipping up in ways he never intended. So yeah, the letters made him infamous, made the American public fear him. But the enhanced files, they might finally make the letters useful. Now, let's dig into the suspects. Segment 4. Suspects and missed opportunities. All right, so here's the part everyone always wants to know. The part that keeps you on the edge. Who was the Zodiac? And the truth is, we still don't know. Over the years, a whole lineup of suspects has been dragged into the spotlight, from the famous Arthur Lee Allen to Richard Gajkowski, and plenty of others. Yet, not a single one was ever charged. Let's start with the name you've definitely heard of in relation to this case, Arthur Lee Allen. This guy was basically the star suspect for decades. Teachers who worked with him said he was odd, he had a history of disturbing behavior, and oh yeah, he owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch with the exact same crosshair symbol the killer wore. Red flag, right? On top of that, one of his friends claimed Allen literally told him he wanted to kill at random and write puzzling letters about it to the press. Yeah, not exactly the kind of info you drop in the middle of a conversation. But here's the downside. When police compared Allen's handwriting, DNA, and fingerprints against the Zodiac evidence, none of it matched.
When you write, you rest the heel of your palm a very characteristic part of it on the paper. And people in those days weren't really aware that you could leave a palm print and that it could be identified. They knew about fingerprints. It was compared to the one that had been developed earlier, and they don't match. That is not Arthur Allen's palm print.
Nothing. He stayed the prime suspect and continued to deny being the killer until his death in 1992.
I'm most certainly not the Zodiac Killer. They haven't arrested me because they can't prove a thing. I'm not the damn Zodiac.
But there was never really enough to pin him down. Next, Ross Sullivan, the library worker. He creeped people out at Riverside City College, where one possible Zodiac-linked murder happened. Students said he wore the same kind of military boots that left tracks at one of the crime scenes. He even looked eerily like the composite sketch. But guess what? Another dead end. Then there's the wild story of Earl Van Best Jr., a suspect pointed to not by police, but by his own son, Gary Stewart. Stewart actually wrote a whole book claiming his father was the Zodiac, pointing to photos, handwriting similarities, and even his dad's creepy criminal past. Did investigators ever buy it? Not really. But the story blew up. And hey, we can't skip Gary Francis Post, the guy who made headlines in 2021 when a group of cold case sleuths called the Casebreakers pinned him as the Zodiac. Post had military experience, lived in California during the murders, and some even claim hidden references in the Zodiac's letters pointed to his name. Now, was it ever proven? Nope. But his name definitely stirred the pot. And here's where the enhanced files twist the knife. Detectives now admit there were jurisdictional problems and a lack of communication problem back then.
And the other one was a park ranger by the name of William White, Bill White, sergeant. And at that time, Bill White turned over to me some of the articles that were found at the crime scene. Didn't really make me too happy at the time because I couldn't actually go to the crime scene because someone thinking they were doing the good thing and the right thing by protecting it actually bundled up the blanket and the clothing and stuff that was there and took it into his custody at various park headquarters. He thought at the time he was doing a very good thing, but at the same time it took us away from the opportunity to actually view the crime scene. So put it in a few simple words, there wasn't really a crime scene to view.
Different police departments each had pieces of the puzzle, but they weren't sharing them properly. Imagine trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, except 3 different people are hoarding the corners and nobody wants to trade. Some experts think an early suspect might have been sitting right in front of them, but the red tape, the turf wars, and the lack of communication let him slip away. And that's the haunting part. Because when you add it all up, Allen, Gary, Earl, Sullivan, each one feels like they could be the guy. But in every single case, the trail just stops. Which leaves us wondering, was Zodiac one of them? Or did all these false leads and the lack of coordination may have handed the killer exactly what he wanted? Confusion, chaos. Give the real killer the cover he needed to disappear forever. Segment 5. What technology just revealed? All right, so here's where things get wild. Remember those Zodiac letters we talked about earlier? The ones everyone has stared at for decades, magnifying glasses out, late night looking over case files, hoping to catch a slip-up? Well, with new imaging technology, investigators finally gave them a second life. And guess what? They weren't just words on paper. They were layers. Using advanced forensic scans, detectives found pressure traces on the envelopes and hidden impressions beneath the actual handwriting. Think of it like invisible notes pressed into the page without meaning to, dents and scratches that the Zodiac never planned for anyone to see. And hidden in those faint impressions, partial names, numbers, little fragments that had been sitting there all along. Now here's the eyebrow raiser. One of those impressions looks a lot like part of a street name in Vallejo. And if you've been following the Zodiac story, you know Vallejo wasn't just some random city. It was one of his key hunting grounds. Detectives are now digging into old maps and records, asking, does this fragment point to a safe house, a residence, or maybe even a place he scoped out before an attack? If this really is a geographical clue, then for the first time, we're not just talking about puzzles or threats meant to waste time. We're talking about a breadcrumb the Zodiac left behind by accident. And if that tiny street fragment leads anywhere, it doesn't just change how we see the Zodiac case in San Francisco. It might tie him to murders far outside the Bay Area. Segment 6. The ripple effect across other cold cases. Okay, buckle up, because this is where things start to get really interesting. Remember that tiny Vallejo street fragment from the enhanced letters? Yeah, detectives aren't just staring at it, they're running with it. They're now comparing the Zodiac files to unsolved cases all over Northern California, and get this, even out in Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. Some of these old cold cases, they're spooky and similar. Same couples in lovers' lanes scenario, same type of weapon, same eerily calm approach. And suddenly, those murders that were just cold cases start to feel connected, like pieces of a puzzle that's been sitting in a box for decades. Take Nevada, for example. A couple attacked in 1970. The M.O., so close to Berryessa and Vallejo it's almost creepy. Detectives are combing through ballistics, crime scene layouts, even timelines. And if that Vallejo street fragment ties in, well, it could be the first geographical lead putting Zodiac somewhere he shouldn't have been, and maybe linking him to attacks outside his home turf. Now, with the enhanced files, every faint impression, every pressure point, every scribble suddenly has new meaning. What looked like nothing before, some smudges on a letter, tiny indentations, now might be the first real clue linking decades of unsolved crimes. And that, my friends, is exactly why the Zodiac case is far from over. So, the takeaway here is the Zodiac might not have been just a Bay Area nightmare. The files, the letters, the enhanced evidence, it's painting a picture of a killer whose reach may have been way wider than anyone dared to think. And that's exactly why the obsession, online sleuths, documentaries, true crime fans, isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Segment 7. Fans, Theories, and Global Fascination. All right, so this is where the Zodiac goes full-on legend status. Because if the murders made people terrified, the letters and the mystery made him immortal in pop culture. Movies, documentaries, podcasts, you name it. The 2007 film Zodiac alone reignited the obsession for a whole new generation. And it's not just Hollywood. The case keeps breathing in forums, YouTube channels, Reddit threads, and amateur sleuth groups all over the world. Amateur investigators have built communities online, dissecting every single cipher, every letter, and every police report, even digging up new suspects like Richard Gaikowski and even Ross Sullivan. And sometimes, they find things the pros missed. Tiny inconsistencies, weird handwriting marks, or patterns across attacks that somehow slipped through official investigations. Basically, the public has become a shadow detective force, and now, with the enhanced files revealing hidden impressions, faint pressure points, and even that Vallejo street fragment, there's new fuel for people to dig into. Now, most people assume the Zodiac is either dead or elderly, which is probably true. But that doesn't stop the obsession. The case survives because of curiosity, speculation, and the thrill of the unknown. Each new clue, every enhanced detail, gives the global community a reason to keep poking, theorizing, and asking the same question everyone has asked for decades. Who was he really? And that's the thing, the Zodiac isn't just history. He's a living puzzle. The enhanced files don't just give detectives new tools, they give us something to obsess over too. And as long as people are thinking, theorizing, and analyzing, the case stays alive, thrilling, terrifying, and completely unsolved. Bottom line, the Zodiac isn't just a crime story. He's a mystery we're now all a part of. Segment 8. The Golden Thread Reveal, the hidden detail. All right, we've gone through the murders, the letters, the suspects, and even the global fascination. But here's where it gets really intense. Detectives working with the enhanced files have uncovered something that might just be the Zodiac's golden thread. Turns out, those faint impressions and pressure marks in the letters aren't random. They suggest he rehearsed his taunts, drafted multiple letters at once, and may have accidentally left fragments of his environment behind. Numbers, words, even parts of addresses. And one of those impressions, it might actually link to a Vallejo street, possibly the first real geographical clue ever tied directly to the Zodiac letters. So here's where we leave it. The Zodiac Killer may always remain partly a mystery, but these enhanced files have given us a glimpse behind the curtain, a hidden detail that proves the answers might have been there all along. We just didn't have the tools to see them. And now, we finally do. The Zodiac Killer. 50 years of fear, letters, ciphers, and endless mystery. And yet, after all this time, the files are finally talking. Hidden impressions, faint pressure marks, even fragments of addresses are giving us, and investigators, glimpses of a killer we thought we'd never get close to. It's thrilling, because for the first time in decades, we're seeing details that were invisible to the naked eye. Clues that suggest the Zodiac may have been closer than anyone imagined. But it's also gut-wrenching. The truth might have been sitting there all along, hidden in plain sight. Every letter, every smudge, every subtle mark could have brought us closer. If only we had the tools then to see it. And so the question hangs in the air. Will these enhanced files finally solve the Zodiac mystery? Or will he remain a ghost, forever slipping through our fingers? For fans of true crime, this isn't just history. It's a puzzle, a legend, and a reminder that sometimes the scariest mysteries aren't out there in the dark. They're hiding right under our noses, waiting for someone to finally notice. If you enjoyed this, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.